Bring you greetings from many, many brothers and sisters in Israel, certainly from our own congregation in Netanya, and many others in the land. I want to thank you. I have a heart full of thanksgiving to the Lord, of course, but also to his people that you have in such a beautiful manner received me, and that you are doomed to sit here for an hour and 15 minutes. I think probably we'll cut that a little bit short. I'm not quite sure my voice will last for an hour and 15 minutes. I'm having a little bit of difficulty here. But we shall do our best. It's a great privilege and an honor to stand before you as one of your brothers and sisters. I am no more than that. None of us really are more than that. We are what God does through us. And if I'm a pioneer, it's just meant that I got there first and took a bit of flack, but thank you for the kind words. And I just wanted to share with you today some thoughts that I have. I'd like to bring you into the picture a little bit about the current state of affairs in Israel regarding the believers and the growth of the Messianic body in that country over the years since we've been there. So I'll be doing that, and occasionally I'll be clearing my throat because that's necessary today, evidently. The Parashat HaShavua, the weekly portion from last week and from this week, Vaytzei Vayishlach, they tell a story. They tell about a journey. You know this. Whose journey was this? Jacob. Jacob's journey to Padan Aram to find a wife. We won't go into all the history of it, but what is important to me is the journey. Not necessarily just the physical journey, because that was certainly a physical journey, but also a spiritual journey. And I'm captivated by the story's telling of Jacob's spiritual journey, coming from a place where he knew that his father and his grandfather and those worshiped the God of Israel, but he wasn't quite sure in his own mind yet. And he found the answer as he wrestled with this angel, or with the Lord, if you will. And then the God of Israel became also his God. And the scripture reflects that particularly. His name was changed. And so we bear his name, Israel. We are the Jewish people. And in many ways, the Jewish people over the centuries are very much like Jacob/Israel. Jacob was a conniver, if you want to put it that way. He knew how to make things work. We'd call him in Israel a combinist. He makes combinations of things that will work, And the family history, if you've tracked it, would be a classic family history case for some family counseling, because they went through all sorts of difficulties, and they had all sorts of difficulties personally themselves. But I'm very grateful for that. I'd say that to some people, and they say, "Oh, how can you talk about that, about the fathers in the faith in that way, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob?" They were people. They were no more people than you are. They were no greater than you are. They were simply chosen by God and equipped by God to do what God wanted them to do. And this, you can be sure of, is also true for you. If the Lord wants you to do something, he'll choose you. He will also equip you. He will be with you through that. So the journey of the Jewish people through history is like the journey of Jacob/Israel. These are two different kinds of characters, really, because Jacob was the one who sort of made things work. He would lie when he had to, or he would cheat a little bit here and there when he had to, and he knew how to do those things, right? When he saw God face to face, as it were, and he became Israel, the man who struggled with God and with men and overcame, in other words, he was still alive, that was a changed person. If you read from that portion on through the rest of the story of Jacob, you'll see something very interesting. Sometimes the scripture will speak of Jacob, sometimes it'll talk about Israel. And when it's Jacob, it's usually something that has to do with the land, the people, the business, the whatever, you know. When it talks about Israel, it has to do with the spiritual calling or the spiritual promise and this sorts of things. You just study it out for yourself. You'll see that this is a true reflection of a kind of a double personality, if you will. In a way, it's a bit like us. The old man, still rises up occasionally, and me, I don't know about you, but it still does. But the new man, of course, in Yeshua the Messiah, will overcome. And it is that one that God is going to save and do his work through. So the people of Israel are a bit like that. They're on this journey. They sometimes don't know if they are Jacob or if they are Israel. Now, the reason I bring this up is because it represents basically a real shift in Jewish life. In Israel, when we went there in 1974, there were 4 congregations which met in the Hebrew language. They had been there for quite some time. They were very, very conservative, very tightly contained sort of fortresses of people who had suffered a lot for their faith, or for being there. When we came there, then we established a congregation which was the first of you might say, the new wave of the congregations that were established. So that made 4 congregations in 1976, 1977. There were maybe 150 maximum believers in Jesus in the country, Jewish believers. Today, there are over 17,000 Jewish believers. It's a good guess. Everything's a guess. And there are over 150 congregations and many more small groups that meet together. I wanted you to be aware that there's been a growth. I wanted you to be aware that God is really doing something in the land. He's not doing it by fits and starts. He's not doing it immediately. He's not doing it with vast proportions, but there is a slow, steady, healthy growth of believers in Jesus in the land. That's the way we should grow, really. Easy come, easy go. But this kind of growth you build upon foundations. The Lord watches over this process. You know that. God watches over his people. The Lord watches over his people to guide them, to protect them, and to keep them. He is the good shepherd. The shepherd of Israel, Roe Israel, he will neither slumber nor sleep. He is watching over his people to lead them and to guide them into his salvation. So although we were still very small in numbers in terms of percentages in the country, it is growing. But it's even more important what is happening amongst us and the general society that we live in. And I will bring that to you in just a minute. But the story of the shepherd is a lovely one. You know what the shepherd does? He watches the sheep. When the ones that go astray, he will go and get them, and he will gather them, and he will carry them, and he will feed them. And he takes good care of them. I'd like to sing a song, if I have enough voice to do it. We're going to try. I'm going to give it the old school try. And it's called The Shepherd. And this is a song which I wrote, well, let me put it this way. I wrote it in two parts. The first part I wrote probably in 1981 or 2, something like this. I don't recall precisely. And after that, I couldn't get a continuation. I knew it wasn't as big enough to be really a song. It was only half a song. But I couldn't get the second part, didn't know what it was supposed to be. So I just put it on the shelf and forgot about it. And we had living with us my mother-in-law, my wife Lisa's mother, Jean Stewart, God rest her soul. She lived with us for 14 years. We nursed her through very dramatic cancer, and she finally passed away in our arms, in our house, and 14 years after she came to be with us. When my father died, my mother died. They were in the States. I was in America. I was in Israel. I tried to come, but I missed my father's funeral by about half an hour. So I couldn't even be there for that. I was stuck because there was no Greyhound bus service to where I had to go, where they were in a little town. So my mother died quite unexpectedly, and I never was able to come to grips with the question of how to grieve my parents. I couldn't grieve in the normal manners, you know? I didn't cry. But when Jean, Lisa's mother, died, again, I kind of ate it because I was her primary caretaker, and we watched her and nursed her through. She was a believer, thank God, and she went to glory. And, okay, she's gone now. I still couldn't. One day, maybe 2 months afterwards, I sat down at the piano and I started to write the second half of The Shepherd, Prepare the Way of the Lord. And as I did this, I began to weep. I began to weep, and I wept, and I wept, and I wept, and I wept. For probably 3 days, I wept. All that pent-up grief that I couldn't find before, the Lord released in the second half of the song. So I hope I make it through without weeping. But this is The Shepherd, number 1. Briefly, maybe I'll sing the other one, but He shall watch his flock like a shepherd. He shall gather the lambs in his arms. Shall carry them in his bosom, and shall gently lead those that are with young. For he shall bless his people with peace. highway for our God prepared. For he shall bless his people with peace. They that wait on the Lord shall renew their strength. They shall mount up with wings as eagles. They shall run and not be weary. They shall walk and shall not be faint. For he shall bless his people with peace. Prepare the way of the Lord, make straight his paths, a highway for our God prepared. For he will bless his people with peace. Peace is not a natural state of the world. You know this. The natural state of the world is warfare and strife and competition and all these sorts of things. Peace is a gift. It is a blessing. There will be no peace without that Prince of Peace giving it to us. There will be no peace in the Middle East without the Prince of Peace, without a revelation of Jesus to my people. Not only to my people, to the Islamic peoples as well, to our neighbors around. There is only one way to true peace, and that is through Yeshua the Messiah. Yeah. My wife and myself, we went to Israel in 1974, as I had mentioned. We went with very little. We were well prepared to go because there was very little there when we got there. But we were hippies, you know. I had lived and worked in New York City for years. I was production manager of the Joffrey Ballet Company. I saw my dear sister here, the only other person I've seen who has worked for the Joffrey Ballet Company in 40 years. I haven't seen anybody. There she is. And I was what you'd call a city hippie. Yeah. I took the company to the West Coast, to Tacoma, Washington area, where we did performances there. And there we finished the tour, and I left them there, and I took maybe 2 weeks to go into the woods. Now I went out into the Olympic Peninsula. How many know where that is, the Olympic Peninsula? Yeah, you may think that Seattle is the end of the earth, you know, west for the United States, but it's not true. There's another couple of 100 miles of Olympic Peninsula all the way to the end. And we were living out there in the Olympic National Forest. I mean, that's where I was going for my little vacation. I would catch fish, and we would eat, roots and berries, myself and a friend of mine that we went there. And we would eat roots and berries and fish and this sort of thing. It was very, very nice, idyllic kind of life, But after about, we came out of the woods after about a week and a half, and I really, really, really wanted a hamburger. So we found ourselves driving through a little logging camp. It was, who was living there was probably 15 or 20 loggers, that's all. And there was a gas station, and they also did hamburgers. So we said, that sounds right to me. So I went in, and we ordered a hamburger. And I'm a little place called Sappho, Washington, if you believe. Sappho, okay. I look over to the table over by the door, and here's this big pile of books. And I thought, well, somebody really loves books. I wonder if they sell books. And I looked again. I saw that there was this, what looked to me like a little girl, very young person, sitting behind the books, reading these books. And she was, really studying something. And I thought, who in the earth is that? Well, we got to talking a little bit. And then, in all fairness to my wife, this is where we diverge in our testimony as to who picked up whom. But I took her back to her cabin in the woods. She was living alone as a woods hippie. So here's a city hippie and a woods hippie coming together, just like the old story, And she lived 5 miles from the nearest other living human being. There were numbers of hippies in those woods, but not in communes. We were all kind of scattered around in little homesteads and little places. She rented 80 acres of land and this little cabin for $5 a year. $5 a year. Yeah. Just, that somebody would live there. Beautiful place, right on the banks of the Solduck River. I told the Lord, I said, if we get up there, that's what I want. I would like that kind of a situation in my mansion, if you don't mind. We'll see how it goes. I was with her for 20 hours, maybe. And then I had to go back to New York, finish out the season there, and we were getting ready to take a show to Chicago. So I said goodbye, I'll be back. And I took my rental car back out this awful logging trail, back out. I'm glad it was a rental car. I don't recall that I had paid anything for the damages, and I knew I would come back. I knew that in that moment, our lives were sealed together. I finished off the season there. I came back, and we knew each other then. We stayed together, lived together for 2 weeks, and we decided that we needed to make a commitment to each other. So we decided to do something very unusual in the hippie community. We decided to get married. So we did. I won't tell you the story of the wedding. We'd be here until midnight. But this was the very beginning of our life together. And the very beginning of our life together was amazing because we had known each other maybe 2 weeks and 20 hours. Yeah? And in 2 weeks' time, we celebrate 50 years of marriage, thank God. And I think that it's only God who has done this because we were so far apart. But we knew we needed commitment, and that's why we did this. I've been a pastor in Israel for 35 years. Some young people come to me and say, we want to be married. And I say, well, you have to go through a 6-month marriage counseling course before you can get married and so on. I just pray that they don't ask me, well, did you do that? You know? because if God is in it, then that's the most important thing. We were there in 1974. We founded a congregation in Netanya. We didn't know precisely what we were supposed to do there, other than we knew where we were to live. We knew that we were to write music for the up-and-coming, not yet seen Messianic body in the country. And we knew that we were to start a meeting in our house. So we woke up one morning on Shabbat, and we sat down and we prayed together, and we read from the scriptures, and I spoke a word of preaching, I guess you could call it, and she translated it into Hebrew, because her Hebrew's always been about that much better than mine, still is today. So, who was there? Myself, my wife, and the cat, and that was it. God began to add people to us, 2 by 2, by miraculous means, And then now there's a congregation of 150, there's over 200 and some listed, but any meeting you'll find 150, 170 people at the meeting in Netanya. I pastored the congregation for 35 years, together with another brother, and then another brother after that, so we were 3. And so when time came for me to say, I think on my 75th birthday, I will begin to prepare myself to leave. So we took a year to do this. It was very, very lovely, with all the blessings and so on and so forth that went with the congregation. They loved us. We loved them. Will always. And this congregation, if you get to Netanya, will be very welcoming and open to you. It's called Beit Tehila, and you can reach them through me, if nothing else. So in this, I left the congregation because, well, first place I was 75. I thought it was time to do that. Put it and leave it to someone else. I love to, that's what pioneers do. They build things and then they place them in the hands of somebody else to take them and carry them forward. That's what we're supposed to do. And so that's what I did in this case. And because I also had always been involved in music. I started writing music when I was 8 years old. I had my first choir at 15. I was a professional singer at age 17 until now, I guess. And I'm 83, so you can do the math by yourself later on, okay? God is great. God is wonderful, and he has accompanied us all this way. But because I always loved to do the music, and I was doing it even as a pastor, doing music on the side, I felt a little bit conflicted, So then I was able, when I retired, to concentrate on doing the music only. And this was a wonderful thing. Now, I'd like to bring us up sort of to the present, talk a little bit about the body of Israel body of Messiah in Israel. When we went, as I say, there were very few people. Now there are many, many, many more. The believers in Israel have always been on the fringe. They've been what you call fringe people, As long, we'll countenance their presence as long as they keep their heads down. But when you lift your head up, it becomes a target. So this was pretty much in the old days, not so much now. But now we are seeing how the body is coming into the center of the society. We have Messianic lawyers, we have Messianic parliamentarians, we have Messianic doctors and engineers and people in high tech and business people. They're everywhere. And we are coming into the center of society, which is really, really a beautiful thing to see, because everyone carries a seed. Everyone carries seed. And you sow that seed where you go. And this is exactly what is happening, being a witness to our people, that they might see and be saved. In 2009, I had an amazing experience. I have to give credit here where it is due. There's a woman called Irene Deuce Poe Levy. That is to say, she's outlived 3 husbands. She's well up into her 90s, still in Jerusalem, a fiery woman, loves the Lord with all her heart. And for 30 years, she nurtured in her heart, why can't we sing the Messiah of George Frederick Handel in Hebrew? Won't somebody translate it to Hebrew? And all the musicians in the country kind of dreaded seeing her coming because they knew what she was going to say, you know. Why don't you do da-da-da-da? You know, and she would beat on us a little bit, bless her heart. Wonderful saint, I love her to death. She finally found some good ground and beat on this fellow named Amikam Tavor, who began the work of actually translating it. I guess he couldn't resist anymore. And then Aryeh Bar David took it over as well, and they translated about 2/3 of the Messiah to the Hebrew language. And they were going to do a performance, sort of a test run, you know, kind of a performance in Jerusalem. So they invited me to come in. I was going to sing the bass solos, which I did do, and helped train the choir, which I did do. But when I heard and learned and saw how this work in Hebrew fit the music like a glove, I could not help but think the Lord had it in his heart from the beginning. As George Frederick Handel in the 1700s wrote this music, and Janner, his librettist, wrote the music, put together the book, the lyrics for this. And it fits so beautifully. It actually is uncanny to see how well it fits the Hebrew. And I thought at that time, I said, this cannot just stay here. We have to take this public. So I asked and got permission to do it more on a more professional level. And we began, I translated the last third of it. Since that time, incidentally, we do all sorts of other music. We do composers, all the major composers. Some of them we do in the original languages. Many of them now we're translated to Hebrew. I've translated several things to Hebrew. And I can give you a list of it later on if you want. It's not important now. But the Messiah still remains the single most complete and perfect presentation of the gospel from A to Z. Ever put to music, ever put in a book, except for the Bible itself, of course. Because it begins with the prophecies and then the fulfillments of them in the life of Yeshua, from his birth, his death, his birth, his life, his death, his suffering, his resurrection, his victory over death, and this inheritance which is passed on to his people. So it's complete. It's really beautiful. So now we do the Messiah in Hebrew every year since 2009. I formed a nonprofit association called Kamti, K-A-M-T-I, in Israel in 2009, and I founded the Liturgical Concert Choir. I say it that way because in Hebrew it means easy liturgy. We do liturgical music, that is to say music of the Bible, music of prayer, music about the Messiah. We do it, and in as much as possible, we do it in the Hebrew language. Our motto is excellence and accessibility in the arts. So we do musical productions, we do concerts. We have to do them very well because the Israeli audience loves music, goes to hundreds of concerts, and they are a very discerning audience, and a not very kind one sometimes for that reason. So we have to be good. We're getting better all the time, thank God. It's amazing because the Israeli loves music. You know, Jews have been involved in the arts forever and ever. They love music, and when there's concerts, always of liturgical music, they're always there. It's wall-to-wall Israelis, non-believers, seeing these concerts, including the Messiah. There are at least 4 different, quite different productions of the Messiah that happen every single year in Israel from different organizations and different groups. And they're all stuffed with people. They are very well attended. The Israeli loves his music. He loves the Messiah. He loves things that are liturgical in origin. And you know that most liturgical music, 95% of liturgical choral music is Christian in orientation. It was written by people from that Christian background. So they are getting it all the time. They're getting it in German, they're getting it in Latin, they're getting it in English, they're getting it in French, whatever. They understand about 10% of what's being said. What happens when you take that work and translate it into the hard language of the people, and they all of a sudden they hear it in their own language, and they understand every single word, they understand every single promise, they understand every single fulfillment of that promise as it's written in the scriptures. This is the inheritance of the Jewish people. The scriptures are their inheritance. It is their book, including the what's called New Testament scriptures, the New Covenant scriptures, are all Jewish inheritance, saved by them and brought down to us that they might enrich us and lead us to salvation. Isn't this wonderful? So let's look at it in Hebrew. What do you see? You see the Messiah. You see his suffering. You see exactly the Bible, what the Bible says about Jesus, about Yeshua. I'd like to play just a little clip. This will be number 2. I'd like to play just a little clip that would, from one of the concerts that we did of the Messiah. Oh, this was probably done maybe 3 years ago, something like that. Thank God we've improved a little since then. But this is a clip near the end of the Messiah. It's at the end of the 3rd portion of the Messiah, which is in 3 portions. And it's a very, very clear message of Yeshua and what he did for us. You can see it in the subtitling. So could we just have that clip, please? It's number 2. See Roy Kendall, yeah? That's a clear message and understandable to all who see it. We were amazed as we began to do this. People who had been seen many, many, many productions of the Messiah and always enjoyed it, but when they first really understood what was being said in their own language, from their own scriptures, there was amazing reactions. There's a man in the orchestra manager. They're not believers. He came to me afterwards when we finished the great Amen at the end of it. He said, if the Messiah is going to return, he'll do it now. Interesting how he put it. If the Messiah is going to return, yeah, then he will do it now. The first tenor that we had singing, another man, not the gentleman who was singing here, but the first tenor that we had, when he got to the parts in the piece about singing about the suffering of Yeshua, and there was no man to comfort him, and so on and so forth, he could hardly finish it. He was actually so moved, so overwhelmed as he was singing this. Secular, totally secular Israeli artist. His mother, who had been to all the concerts that he'd ever done, which probably are hundreds, and seen the Messiah several times, sat down in the front row right here on that particular performance, one of the first we ever did. And I looked down, and she was weeping. I'm telling you, it's wonderful. The comments afterwards, I never realized what I was listening to. And God is working and moving hearts. There are two scriptures which guide us in Comte, our organization, and in the choir that we do. The first is from Proverbs 25:11. It says, apples of gold in frames of silver is the word beautifully presented. Now, this is a lovely picture. We know what the gold is. This is the Word of God. The frame is our way of presenting that, and we do it in the arts. It's like a frame of gold. It sets off the work. It's not for itself. The concerts are not because they're art pieces, but it sets off the Word and allows an entrance into the heart through the ear, through the eye, whatever. So this is what we do. This is the Word. The other one is that God himself said of his Word, I will send it forth and it will do that work which I have apportioned for it to do. It will not return to me empty. It will do the work. So we don't have to do altar calls or pass out tracts or any other thing. We present the Word of God, and it does its work. And we have seen it over and over and over again through these things. One of the most precious experiences that God has allowed us to be a part of really deeply involves our brother, Roy Kendall, whom you saw singing in the yeah. We also have 2 or 3 Orthodox Jews who sing with us as well. They love what we're doing and they support it. But Roy Kendall, one day, here about 5 years ago, he called me on the phone. He said, David, we have to talk. I said, okay. He says, when can we meet? I said, well, can't we talk on the phone? No, we have to meet personally. All right, so when do you want to meet? He says, typical of Roy Kendall, well, I'm flying out tomorrow morning, so because he's everywhere, you know. So maybe we could meet at the airport. So I go drive to, what the earth is he on about here? So I drive to Ben Gurion. We sat down in the coffee shop and sat down. He said, listen, I have this idea. Because we talked about somehow or another serving some of the less fortunate communities in our midst, particularly the Holocaust survivors. And he said, everywhere I go, wherever I make a meeting, I will talk about this work. I will ask people if they want to buy a ticket to go to the concert. Now, of course, if you're living in Hoboken or something, you don't just pop over to Israel for a concert. But that money then is used to subsidize the attendance of Holocaust survivors. So we have a wonderful, this is a great opportunity. This is a great offer on his part, but his heart was so moved at the thought of doing this. The Holocaust community, Holocaust survivor community, as you well know, there's probably several thousand in Israel. It's a rapidly dwindling community. The average age is something like 78 or 79. And in another 10, 15 years, you'll be hard-pressed to find one. So it's the time to be able to reach a people who are dying before they go off into eternity, to give them hope. So we do this for them, and we subsidize. The first year was one busload, 50 people. The second year it doubled, it was 100. The next year it doubled, it was 200. And we start moving from there. Last year was 350 Holocaust survivors that we subsidized to come into the concert and also to have a snack in the break and so on and so forth. This was a wonderful, wonderful opportunity. And a little bit later, I'll give you some of the comments that these people made. In the meantime, we partnered with another organization to help make this possible. This is an organization that ministers a lot to the Holocaust survivors, and that's what's called the Helping Hands Coalition. And they bring the buses, they make all the arrangements for people and bringing them. They pay for the buses and so forth to bring them to the concerts. It was wonderful. And here's a short little video. This will be number 3. The HCC video. This is a short video that they made for their own purposes, but basically it gives you a bit of the color and the flavor of what it is to sit there in this auditorium with these Holocaust survivors. So let's play that video and then we'll talk a little bit about that if you could. Thank you. It's not our choir singing. Here, at least.
Welcome to the auditorium here in Orekiva, just adjacent to Caesarea by the sea.
We are here in Orekiva this evening to see a concert, The Messiah, composed by Handel, performed by a group of professional Israeli musicians.
This special presentation of Handel's Messiah with the director David Loden.
The glory of the Lord shall be revealed.
We sponsor different groups of Shalom houses, and here tonight some of them are invited to be at the concert of the Mashiach from Handel.
It's a very special event, both because of the nature of the concert, but also because of the collaboration of the different organizations who work together to bring about 250 Holocaust survivors. We have Helping Hand Coalition here, together with American Friends of Helping Hand Coalition, as well as the Gain Netherlands, and other representatives who work closely here in Israel to help Holocaust survivors, as well as David Loden, who conducted this whole event and put the music together.
been wonderful so far.
And I like it to be here just at this moment to join the concert with all the people.
We want to especially thank all of you who have been praying.
אנחנו מרוצים שאנחנו פה.
So this is what we are doing now. Isn't that wonderful? From that concert that was filmed, as the buses took the Holocaust survivors back to their places where they live, or their areas where they live, somebody wrote down several of the entirely unsolicited comments of the Holocaust survivors in Hebrew, as they said, they spoke them out, you know. One of them was a woman that said, it's like going into cold water and coming out again. It's like going down into the rivers of the Jordan and coming out again. Can you imagine this? Where did that come from, you know? Entirely unsolicited comment. Another one that says, what you're doing, God sees, and he will reward you for it. And a third one which really touched my heart, thank you for bringing joy to us and hope, us who have not known anything but pain and sorrow all of our lives. The Holocaust survivors are, many times they cannot talk about their experiences at all. It's just total, they can't talk about it. It was so horrible. The children of Holocaust survivors suffer from all sorts of syndromes which are known to the psychiatric people in Israel, particular syndromes that accrue to the children of first generation, second generation Holocaust survivors. Traumatic stuff. But they can hear and they can have hope and they can have joy and they know where it comes from. Eh? Let me ask you a question. If you had the opportunity to get an auditorium of people, 700, 800, 900 seats of people, fill it up with non-believing Jewish Israelis in Israel, and preach the gospel to them for 2.5 hours, and they loved it, and they received it with joy, and they applauded. Not only that, they paid for the privilege. Would you do it? Of course you would. This is what God has enabled us to do in this Messiah performance. I used to play guitar. I used to sing a lot. I don't sing so much anymore, but I can't play guitar because I have arthritis in this thumb. Thank you for all your comments. I must have gotten 6 or 7 different recipes just from here today about what to do about the thumb. So I hope one of them works. But God always has something in front of you, doesn't he? No matter, you finish what you think you've done. My work is finished in this world. There's always something else. Now I just wave my hands and everybody else sings and plays. That's wonderful. That's progress. I'm going to put some materials in the back, on a table out in the back. One of them is just a little bit about myself, which you already know most of, and about the choir. The other side is a copy of the short newsletter that we send out 2 or 3 times a year, no more than that. And just as an example, as a sample. And then this, which is a little flyer that we put out, has a little bit about the choir also. And on the back side is the necessary information. If anybody would like to partner with us, they may do so, and that is all I'm going to say about that. When we do the Messiah, we print up a nice program. You probably saw them in the video. It's in Hebrew and in English. You begin to open it up. And you open it up, and there is the information about the singers and the orchestra and all that sort of thing. You open it up fully, and here is the entire text of the Messiah, front to back, in 2 languages, in English and in Hebrew. Okay? They look at this. We leave the house lights on so they can follow it. They follow it religiously, and you probably saw them taking them home with them because they're a nice program. We give them away for free. And so they take this home with them, and it's in their home. Now that's wonderful. I mean, I think that's really, really wonderful stuff. And to God be the glory for all these things. In 1994, I wrote an opera. The opera is called David and Bathsheba. It's the story of David and Bathsheba after the sin, their process of repentance, coming to grips with their sin, paying the price of the death of the child, and eventually being restored again to God with a promise for the future. That opera, we produced it and did it in 1995 in Israel. In the big theaters of Israel, we did 5 performances of it. The Lord has been talking to me for 3 years. I've been fighting him on this because it's an enormous project, and it wasn't fun doing it the first time because we had so much interference from the Orthodox community. But he's been telling me now for the last 3 years we want to do that again. So that's another project that we are doing. That's quite apart from the work of the choir as such, but it is something that will be covered by our nonprofit organization, COMT. You have already seen, even in the worship, he played a clip or 2 from Jamie Hillston and the group called the band Mikedim. Mikedim is also under our umbrella. They are part of the ministry of COMT, so that you know that we're not just us, the choir, but we have other things as well, to bring the word of God to our people Israel so that they can understand it, so that it can do its work in their hearts. And with that, I think I'm going to close myself here. And I wanted to thank you so much for being a wonderful audience. Actually, we got one more clip, don't we? I wonder if we should do that. Can you sing with me? You have to, you have to help me. Not a lot left here. Let's do the Ram Venisa, both the clip and the PowerPoint, if you would, please. This is a song which has been quite popular in Israel. We love to sing it. It's a song of glory and praise to the Lord. High and exalted is the Messiah. So as it comes up, you'll be able to see. High and lifted up is the Messiah. He's clothed with grandeur and glory. Here in my heart, the Messiah dwells in his temple, or in his fullness. Actually, the word is hechalo, which means temple. So the translation is not all that good. But I want to sing it, and I want us to sing it together. We'll do the chorus twice, and then we'll do the verses. And then we'll go back to the chorus. You know how this goes, don't you? Mashiach.